Making the headlines tonight. The United Nations Ambassador of Cambodia calls the bias of United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Cambodia, saying that the OHCHR in Cambodia acts silently and dangerous populist in certain opposition elements. Foreign Minister spokesman Chun Sandi tells reporters an ASEAN-US Special Summit has been postponed until further notice. Yoon Suk-yeol, a conservative former top prosecutor, has been elected South Korea's new president, defeating his chief liberal rival in one of the country's most closely fought presidential elections. The Court of Arbitration for Sport announced that the Russian Football Union will repeal its ban by FIFA and UEFA and the club International Soccer. And Gotaponi from India invents a tree climbing scooter to make harvesting betel nuts easier, for an average tree is about 20 metres tall. This is the Daily Roundup on EAC News Channel. A very good evening to you. My name is Anthony Ellis. The United Nations Ambassador, Permanent Representative of Cambodia, Aung San Suu Kyi, reported what he calls the bias of the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights in Cambodia to the 49th session of the Human Rights Council, saying that the OHCHR in Cambodia acts silently on the dangerous populist rhetoric of certain opposition elements, saying their approach to spread disinformation through discriminatory insults and slander, incite racial hatred, xenophobia and cause seduction with cash offers. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has the story.
In a statement issued on Tuesday, March 8th, Cambodia's permanent representative to the United Nations, Aung San Suu Kyi, agreed with the president of the High Commissioner for Human Rights over the politicization of the council and the biased version of a supposed hierarchy among categories of human rights, and expressed disappointment that the High Commissioner appeared to be ill-advised and selective regarding the situation in Cambodia. The permanent representative of Cambodia said he is disappointed with the statement that the strike of the former Naga World casino workers was legal.
To say that the casino workers' strike is lawful is erroneous. The court has declared illegal since last December. The residents had complained of being disturbed by this months-long unlawful protest. Authorities exercised utmost restraint and even knelt down to plead their compliance for the COVID protocols. At least 130 protesters had tested positive.
He then asked the High Commissioner whether a proscribed protest disrupting public order and abusing public health measures could be considered a constitutional exercise of the peaceful assembly. He further added that an inter-ministerial meeting headed by the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Interior convened on Wednesday, March 9th to address the month-long politicized labor dispute. Cambodia's representative to the UN also noted that the OHCHR in Cambodia had been silent on dangerous populist rhetoric of certain opposition elements, whose approach, he said, is to spread disinformation, throw indiscriminate insult and slander, incite racial hatred and xenophobia, and call on sedition with cash offers. He once more posed a question, asking if these are what the High Commissioner could name as legitimate conducts under international law. In the coming months, Cambodia will hold its commune district council elections. The permanent representative of Cambodia has said that the absence of one political party in the coming election, due to its violation of the laws, does not detract Cambodia from pluralism. He has further stressed that regardless of the result, an indisputable fact is that voters can choose one among the 17 political parties already inscribed in the election. All the voters' equal political rights and dignity, whether large or small, must be respected. Deccan Nin, EAC News.
The United Nations Ambassador and a Permanent Representative to Cambodia, Aung San Suu Kyi, responded to the US Permanent Representative to United Nations on the 49th session of the Human Rights Council, saying that the US should respect the autonomy of independent countries and not weaponize human rights with double standards. The Cambodian Permanent Representative reminded the US delegation to heed UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres' call for human rights not to be used as a weapon if all parties want to maintain the highest integrity and credibility of Human Rights Council. Every country has the right to choose its own future and its path, he said, quoting US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Cambodia's response comes after the US Ambassador to the United Nations, Michelle Taylor, expressed concern over the closure of political rights, the right to protest and the arrest or detention of dissents of some of the countries, including Cambodia. The Cambodian representative, An Sakun, stated in his response to the United States' use of human rights issues as weapons attacked and served a political agenda was well known to many delegates at the Human Rights Council. He further rejected the allegations made by the United States, saying that there was no biased law enforced in Cambodia and that the space for civil society rights was respected by the royal government. He said, if the civil society freedom was restrictive, why does the number of registered NGOs keep rising to nearly 6,000? The fact is that the grievances come from a handful of heavily politicised and foreign-funded NGOs demanding transparency but refusing to prove themselves transparent. He urged the United States to adjust its own respect for human rights rather than just look at the problems of others, as its internal obligations remain unresolved. The Cambodian permanent representative said, sadly, this country has for years encountered symptomatic human rights messes, including double standards and hypocrites. In 2001, more than 700 people who had dissenting voice were arrested and charged with crimes after descending on US Capitol. In the same year, more than 50 journalists were arrested and detained across the US. Social media accounts of the former president with just opposing view were banned. The Foreign Minister spokesman, Chum Sondri, told reporters on Wednesday morning that the ASEAN-US Special Summit has been postponed with a new date yet to be specified. EAC News reporter Darshana Guchan has more details.
Spokesperson Chum Sondri has said that the postponement of the ASEAN-US Summit was due to the fact that some ASEAN leaders have stated that they will be unable to make it on the previously proposed dates at the end of March. He said, unfortunately, the proposed dates, both from ASEAN and from the US, were not convenient for our leaders due to their respective heavy agenda. For that reason, both sides, ASEAN and the US, decided to postpone the summit and continue to work for a mutually convenient date. He stressed that Cambodia, as the ASEAN chair, is flexible on the proposed dates and has coordinated especially on the domestic agenda to fulfill its regional and international obligations. As a result, he said for the convenience and possible attendance of all ASEAN leaders, Cambodia has agreed with ASEAN member states to postpone the meeting. Previously, the White House announced on 28 February 2022 that a special summit between ASEAN and the United States would be held at the end of March. Cambodia assumed the rotating chairmanship of ASEAN on 1 January 2022, the country's third time to do so. Darshana Gauchan, EAC News.
The groundbreaking ceremony of the new Win-Win Monument in An Long Veng District, Oda Machay Province was held on Wednesday, 9th of March, presided over the Ministry of National Defence, Deputy Prime Minister T. Bang. EAC News reporter Deccan Nin has the details.
The site of the new Win-Win Monument is located in Phnom Piroi, Tropiang Prey Commune, An Long Veng District, Oda Machay Province. Speaking at the groundbreaking ceremony, Deputy Prime Minister Thiep Bang said that the success of Prime Minister Hun Sen's win-win policy is seen through the history of An Long Veng, which was the last stronghold of the Khmer Rouge. He said that this success has provided lessons, experiences, and a vision to other countries on how such a policy can be effective in ending political and military conflicts. He continued that the achievements in An Long Veng District are as a result of the collective contribution of various stakeholders, including the Royal Cambodian Armed Forces, members of other institutions, and the former Cambodia Democratic Forces who came to the groundbreaking in the spirit of unity, and who will continue to hold the flag of peace for new generations. He said this monument is an invaluable part of Cambodia's historical defense and peace process, then shared the previous words of Prime Minister Hun Sen, who said that when there is peace, there is hope. The first Win-Win Memorial was built in Choi Jongwa District, Prek Tasek Commune, Phnom Penh, and inaugurated in 2018. A second Win-Win Memorial is under construction in Koh Kong, and the third now in An Long Veng District, Oda Machay Province. Dekanin, EAC News.
The Cambodian Mine Action Centre in Set received over $6.4 million from the US and Norwegian governments for the clearance of a cluster mutation remnants of the landmines in Cambodia. EAC News reporter Darshana Guchan has further details.
The Director General of CMAC, Heng Ratana, and the resident representative of the Norwegian People Aid, Rune Dale Anderson, signed the cooperation agreements at CMAC's Phnom Penh headquarters on Wednesday, 9th March. According to Heng Ratana, around $6.3 million of the total amount is allocated for a cluster munitions remnant survey and clearance in eastern Cambodia, funded by the U.S. government, and the remaining $89,000 is allocated for two short-term projects. The first is the landmine survey and clearance on the Cambodia-Thailand border project, and the second is the landmine-free provinces in southern part of Cambodia project funded by the government of Norway. The support from the U.S. will enable CMAC to provide humanitarian services with around 200 demining experts to be deployed to the provinces of Kampong Cham, Tabong Khmum, Krache, Stung Treng, Svai Rieng, Pre Veng, Mondulkiri, and Ratanakiri for cluster munitions remnant survey and clearance. With a duration of 45 months from 1st of March to 30th November 2022, the CMAC expects to clear a targeted land area of 13,200 hectares of cluster munitions. For their part, the demining clearance project will assist CMAC to realize its strategic plans to support the royal government of Cambodia to achieve the country's commitment to the AP Man-Bind Convention by 2025. The CMAC and NPA have a long history of cooperation since 1992, which has included the removal of the threat of landmines and explosive remnants of war, the return of hope, and the rebuilding of a prosperous future for Cambodians. The CMAC Director General said, CMAC wishes to profoundly thank the government and people of America and Norway for their continued commitment and strong support to mine action. Both financial and in-kind contributions have extensively enabled CMAC to have a stronger and more effective operations to fight against the hidden killers and to respond to the needs of millions of people affected by landmines and explosive remnants of war, as well as to support socio-economic development of Cambodia. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
10 more vaccine trucks are scheduled to be delivered to the Lao government from the Royal Government of Cambodia at the Taplang Kleo International Border Crossing, Slang Trang Province, bordering the Lao Province of Chakpansak this Saturday, 12th of March. EAC News reporter Decca Nin has more details.
In a statement issued by the Ministry of Health on Wednesday, the ministry stated that the provision of additional vaccine trucks to the Lao People's Democratic Republic is an expression of Prime Minister Hun Sen's concern for the health and well-being of the Lao people as a neighbor to the country. This vaccine truck donation also signals the building up of defense systems together against COVID-19, as well as the strengthening of cooperation and humanitarianism between Cambodia and Laos. The statement said, Cambodia is a small but generous country, and Cambodia has always been committed to the spirit of friendship, solidarity, and togetherness, with good cooperation in resolving the crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic both in the country and in the region. On December 3, 2021, the Cambodian government provided 400,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines and 3 vaccine trucks to the Lao government to assist the country in the fight against COVID-19. The donation came after a meeting between Prime Minister Hun Sen and Lao Prime Minister Phongkham Viphavan at the Peace Palace on the 29th of November 2021. Cambodia has already provided aid to Laos 3 times, totaling about $13 million, 700,000 doses of vaccines, 3 vaccine trucks, 2.1 million masks, and other medical equipment. Dekanin, EAC News.
On Thursday morning, the Secretary of State and Ministry of Health and Chairman of the National Committee for COVID-19 Vaccine, Al Van Dien, presided over a handover ceremony of 30 vaccine trucks to the 25 capital provincial health departments in Cambodia. EAC News reporter Darshana Gochan has more.
The handover ceremony was held at the Central Medical Storage Facility at the invitation of the directors of the 25 capital provincial health departments. The provincial health departments that are to receive the vaccine trucks are Banti Minche, Battambang, Kampong Cham, Kampong Spu, Kampong Thom, Kampot, Kandal, Pre Veng, Siem Reap, Takao, Tabong Khmum, and the Central Medical Storage Facility of the Ministry of Health in Phnom Penh. The vaccine trucks were donated by Cambodian philanthropists to Prime Minister Hun Sen. The Prime Minister handed over this donation to the Ministry of Health to handle the distribution. The trucks are Ford models that were designed to meet the specific needs of vaccine storage and transport, with a freezer that can reach a temperature of -24 degrees Celsius and many other features. These vaccine trucks are necessary for medical teams across the 25 provinces to transport vaccines across the country, especially the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines donated by Australia, which are required to be kept at particularly freezing temperatures. On Saturday, 12th March, Secretary of State Van Dien will also preside over the handover ceremony of 10 vaccine trucks donated through Prime Minister Hun Sen to the Lao People's Democratic Republic. Darshana Gochan, EAC News.
Cambodia has reported 238 new COVID-19 cases, 24 of which are imported. There have been 312 patient recoveries and 1 new death. Cambodia's Omicron cases now passes 13,000. The kingdom recorded 214 new community and 24 new imported cases of the new variant, meaning Cambodia has now recorded 13,060 cases of Omicron, 1,148 imported, and 11,912 community cases. The kingdom's COVID-19 case tally has now climbed up to 133,501. The death toll now stands at 3,044. The number of patients treated successfully since the pandemic reached Cambodia is 127,995, and the tally for imported cases has climbed up to 21,005. Healthcare workers are now treating a total of 2,386 patients. Now look at the news making international headlines this Thursday, 10th of March.
Ukraine has accused Russia anew on Wednesday, March 9, of bombing a children's hospital in the besieged port of Mariupol during a supposed ceasefire to enable some of the hundreds of thousands of civilians trapped in the city to escape. Russia has said it would hold fire to let civilians flee Mariupol and other besieged cities on Wednesday, but the city council have claimed the hospital had been hit several times. President Volodymyr Zelensky has called it an atrocity. The direct strike of Russian troops at the maternity hospital. Children are under the wreckage, Zelensky has said. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has said Russian forces do not fire on civilian targets. A footage shot by Ukraine military of what appeared to be the badly damaged building of a children's and maternity hospital has showed wreckage of a 3-story building with holes instead of windows and broken facades. Piles of rubble and burnt-out cars were seen smoldering outside, and wounded people were carried from the scene of destruction. The Donetsk region governor has claimed 17 people were wounded, including women and labor. Russia has denied targeting civilians in what it calls a special operation in Ukraine. Both sides have accused each other of violating ceasefires that would allow civilians to evacuate Mariupol, which Russian forces have kept under siege for more than a week.
An intercity train in Argentina has derailed near the eastern town of Oliveira, injuring at least 21 people on Wednesday. An image of a passenger train which many carriages have seen off the rails. Some have turned over in their sides in the middle of the fields in rural area of South America country. At the moment, 21 passengers have received treatment at the hospital, Oliveira Mayor Gali has reported, adding the 5 were children who have been discharged and the 40-year-old passenger has suffered a canal injury. The mayor has also said all those hurt had minor injuries and were being taken care of. I was half asleep. We were all asleep. I felt if we were sliding in an undefined passenger has recalled what happened after the incident. Trenes Argentinos, the state-owned company that operates the country's train network, has confirmed the accident is a statement saying that causes are not yet known and were still under investigation. The 333 train connects with the capital of Buenos Aires with the port of Bahia Blanca.
Several thousands have turned out on the International Women's Day on Tuesday for a Paris march to demand the end of violence against women and social inequalities. French President Emmanuel Macron has pledged to make this fight for women's rights a priority for his term, but feminist organizations accused him and hit government of largely ignoring issues of gender-based violence. Feminist collective Nous Toutes estimates 665 women were killed in France by their partners or former partners throughout Macron's term. Protesters in the Paris march have agreed a lot remain to be done. Once again, we're present, but what we need is actions at the top. I think of French President Emmanuel Macron and what he promised, but where is he now? Protester Judith Abon-Saler has said.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has said on Tuesday that the alliance's responsibility was to ensure the conflict between Russia and Ukraine does not escalate and spread beyond Ukraine. All NATO partners work together on the situation in Ukraine. It is important that NATO is a defence organisation, which means it won't be getting directly involved in the war.
Speaking alongside Latvia's President Egils Levits at Riga Castle, Stoltenberg has said Russia's invasion was causing horrific suffering.
The suffering we now see in Ukraine is horrific. It affects us all. And we have a responsibility to ensure the conflict does not escalate and spread beyond Ukraine. That would be even more dangerous, destructive, and even more deadly. The situation could spiral out of control.
The United Nations have said the number of refugees who have fled Ukraine had surged past 2 million, describing the flight as one of the fastest exoduses in modern times. Moscow describes its actions in Ukraine as a special operation to disarm its neighbor and unset leaders it calls neo-Nazis. Ukraine and its Western allies call this as a baseless pretext for an invasion to conquer a country of 44 million people.
Conservative political novice vows national unity after winning the most closely fought election in recent South Korean history. Yoon Suk-yeol, a Conservative former top prosecutor, has been elected South Korea's new president, defeating his chief Liberal rival in one of the country's most closely fought presidential elections.
60-year-old Yoon from the main opposition People Power Party has edged out the ruling Democratic Party's Lee Jae-myung with 48.6% of the vote to 47.8%, with around 99.8% of the ballots counted as of 5:30 a.m. on Thursday. At a separate ceremony with supporters, Yoon has mentioned he would put top priority on national unity, adding all people should be treated equally regardless of their regional, political, and socioeconomic differences. Yoon has also mentioned he would honor the constitution and parliament and work with opposition parties to heal polarized politics and foster unity, calling the election a victory of the great people. Lee had conceded defeat and congratulated his opponent. Yoon's 5-year term will begin this month to replace incumbent President Moon Jae-in, who is constitutionally barred from seeking re-election. The election boiled down to a two-way showdown between Yoon from the opposition People Power Party and Lee from the governing Democratic Party. They spent months slamming, mocking, and demonizing each other in one of the most bitter political campaigns in recent memory, aggravating the country's already severe domestic divisions. Yoon has added he would deal with North Korean provocations sternly and seek to boost trilateral security cooperation with Washington and Tokyo. He has also highlighted that he would make an enhanced alliance with the United States the center of his foreign policy while taking a more assertive stance on China. The election came as South Korea has been grappling with an Omicron-driven COVID-19 surge. On Wednesday, health authorities have reported 342,446 new virus cases, a record high. People infected with the coronavirus voted after regular voting ended on Wednesday evening. With conservatives initially in shambles after Park's fall, Moon's approval rating at one point hit 83% as he pushed hard to achieve reconciliation with North Korea and delve into alleged corruption by past conservative leaders. He has eventually faced a strong backlash as talks on North Korea's nuclear program have faltered, and his anti-corruption drive has raised questions of fairness. Yoon had been Moon's prosecutor general but resigned and joined the opposition last year following infighting about probes of Moon's allies. Yoon has stated those investigations were objective and principled, but Moon's supporters have claimed he was trying to thwart Moon's prosecution reforms and elevate his own political standing. Yoon's critics have also attacked him for a lack of experience in any party politics, foreign policy, and other key state affairs. Yoon has responded that he would let experienced officials handle state affairs that require expertise.
Already struggling with rising living costs, ordinary Europeans now face an even deeper hit to their livelihoods as the conflict in Ukraine pushes fuel and fuel prices higher, threatens to spark all-out recession.
The surging price of crude oil on world markets has led to the biggest ever weekly jump in gasoline prices at some service stations around Europe, pushing them in some cases above €2 or $2.21 for a liter of unleaded fuel. The problem is not the price it will be tomorrow, but how much gasoline will cost in 15 days from now. We think that it is going to cost much more. I think bad times are ahead of us, a 76-year-old Madrid pensioner Alejandro Otirino has said. That fear of prices spiraling out of control is precisely what the European Central Bank must try to allay at its meeting on Thursday, March 10, when ECB Chief Christine Lagarde will aim to prove it can keep a lead on inflation in the euro area that had already clipped a higher than expected 5.8% before Russia's invasion. There is a natural pressure on central banks to keep inflation expectations low via communication, but at the same time, they risk losing credibility, according to an economics professor at Leipzig University. In Portugal, Western Europe's poorest country with 10% of the population on a minimum wage of €705, motorists have been rushing to fill tanks before any prices hikes come in. A diesel car with a 50-liter tank costs €91 to fill up. Knock-on impacts are being felt already. Activity in the Portuguese-Spanish border have increased recently, as many drivers have decided to cross to Galicia or Extremadura in Spain to fill their tanks cheaper. German motoring organization ADAC have estimated that diesel prices had spiked a massive 28% in 6 days, in part because homeowners were stepping up to purchase of heating oil is still used by many Germans to heat their houses. For now, increases in the end prices of food have been less dramatic, but with Ukraine and Russia both exporters of grain and Russia a major supplier of fertilizers, concern is growing that this will add to inflationary pressures as the war goes on. The fear now is that this will hit consumer spending ever harder, especially among the low-income households who fared worse during pandemic lockdowns in which they did not benefit from furloughs or face other hits to their livelihoods. First, the pandemic, with little work and about 70 or 80% of losses. Then the price of electricity starts going up. But the problem is that it does not stop going up. Every day it goes up and it has not doubled itself. It has tripled itself. People have gone from paying about €400 to €1,000. In Britain, the Resolution Foundation think tank estimated the conflict would lead to wider inflation, shaving 4% of the real level of typical household incomes over the coming year, the sharpest fall in nearly half a century. An expert says that the governments now must inevitably have to pump more support into the economy to help the worst hit. The only way to avoid the vicious circle of more inflation was for the bank to pursue its tightening path.
After the break, a look at all the latest sports news.
If it's happening and you need to know about it, you'll get it all right here. EAC News brings you updates and breaking news in English across all of our platforms and channels. The EAC News app, YouTube, Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, and our website www.eacnews.asia. Join me and the rest of the EAC News team every day on your favorite channels. EAC News, Cambodia made clear.
Denmark's Mad Pedersen won the sprint to finish the stage 3 of the Paris-Nice race on Tuesday, March 8th, after all leader Christopher Laporte crashed in the final stage.
Trek Segafredo rider Pedersen beat Frenchman Brian Coquart and Belgian Wout van Aert to the line in a dramatic finish which saw Laporte fall to the ground after getting caught up with another rider in the final 500 meters. The Frenchman was able to get back on his bike and finish the stage with a bleeding leg. He now leads his teammate Van Aert by just 1 second and Slovenian Primož Roglič by 9 seconds. Pedersen has said, "We missed out yesterday with a bit of bad luck with Kirch having a puncture and me losing a chain. We wanted to make it up today and man, the boys did a fantastic job the whole day to make it as easy as possible for me."
The Court of Arbitration for Sport announced on Tuesday the 8th of March that the Russian Football Union will appeal its ban by the FIFA and UEFA from the club and international soccer, as well as seeking to overturn the ban that the RFU is also seeking a stay that would also allow its teams compete pending full decision.
Last week, a legal expert says that FIFA and UEFA have a strong case that allowing Russia to participate in international in-club football competitions amounts to a force majeure and the current ban should remain in place. Both soccer governing bodies banned Russia, preventing the men's national team from continuing with their World Cup qualifying campaign and the women's team from taking part in this summer's European Championship. Russian participation in European club competitions will also affected. The sanctions followed the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the widespread global condemnation that followed. Legal expert Anton Duval, a senior researcher at Holland Asser Institute and an expert in sports law, said on Friday that letting Russian teams compete could seriously undermine FIFA and UEFA tournaments because other teams could threaten to pull out. Then we are looking at dispute that will focus on the question whether there is a force majeure and that on the Russian side, there will be arguments coming in about what about all the other wars. Why us basically why this war is particular or is specific in constituting force majeure. A line of argument that could be used by the Russian federations to say, well, why not suspend those games? We understand the situation is particular. There is a lot of outrage there, our security risks, for also our teams for participating in those competitions. We would ask, however, to be withdrawn from the competition but to postpone those competitions to a later date. Let's say in 2 months or something, and here there could be another type of debate that will be ongoing before the CAS. Whether this is possible, it would not hinder the good organization of the competition, and so on. Obviously, when we look at the Europa League involving Spartak Moscow, it's going to be more difficult because the competition is moving forward. So here, the argument might stick much less. If you look at the World Cup, maybe there is more room for that. So that might be the type of argument that might be advanced. In general, there is a clear, I would say, difference between PR or social sentiments and legal decisions. And I think there is. But I also think that quotes are not totally out of context. They are also embedded in a social situation, and they are aware of the particular situation. At this point, the particular outrage, and that I think then connects as well with the reasoning around force majeure. I mean that in my view, it's not a bad argument, It's not a legally totally flawed argument to ground those suspensions on the issue of force majeure. Because FIFA and UFA are facing an existential threat to their competitions due to this situation. This existential threat is a total boycott. And the only way to deal with those existential threats is indeed at this point to bar Russian competitors from those competitions. So there is a real case that can be built around that. Those provisions linked to a force majeure, and it would be also legally sound. FIFA and UAFA are facing an existential threat to their competitions due to this situation, and this existential threat is a total boycott, he said. And the only way to deal with this existential threat is indeed at this point to bar the Russian competitors from those competitions. So there is a real case that can be built around that, those provisions linked to force majeure, and it would be also legally sound. Duval added that Russia may argue that other countries at war have not been banned in the past, and that postponing World Cup qualifiers or leaving any decisions over these qualifications until as late as possible would be more proportional.
China continued its cross-country success at the Beijing Paralympics on Wednesday, March 9th, picking up 2 more gold medals. But the Europeans and North Africans hit back later in the day.
Zheng Peng and Yang Hongcheng took the honors for the host nation in the men's and women's sprint sitting events. While Zheng saw off fellow countryman Mao Zhangwu, Yang just pipped Ukraine-born American Oksana Masters, who was rapidly closing in on her on the finish line. In the standing sprint events, Benjamin Daviat of France and Natalie Wilkie of Canada took gold, while the men's sprint vision impaired title went to Brian McKeever. Karina Edlinger of Austria took the women's title. Wilkie's battle with Vild Nielsen was particularly memorable, the pair swapping positions throughout the race before Wilkie made the decisive move in the final 100 meters. The Ukrainian team has excelled in Beijing, winning 8 gold medals to sit third in the table, but standing on the podium has been overshadowed by the crisis back home. While Ukrainian biathlete Anastasia Lalatina was forced to pull out of the middle distance sitting event at the Beijing Winter Paralympics on Tuesday after her father was captured by Russian forces, a spokesperson for the Ukrainian Paralympic Committee had mentioned.
Now let's have a look at the weather and what you can expect for tomorrow. And finally, harvesting betel nuts is a dangerous job as their trees can grow up to 20 metres higher or even more. With ongoing labour shortages, 50-year-old Gautam Panibat decided to invent a tree climbing scooter and get the job easily and safely.
India is one of the world's biggest producers of betel nuts, also known as areca nuts, with about 1.2 million tons produced between 2020 to 2021. Contributing to this number was Bhatt, who owns an 18-acre farm of towering areca palm trees. Bhatt had worked on his invention since 2014 because of the rising cost of labor and his advancing age. His family was worried about him climbing the tall trees, which could be very slippery during the rainy season. The villagers thought he was mad for trying to invent the scooter, as he fell constantly in the beginning. After 4 years of working with his engineering partner and spending about 4 million rupees, or roughly $52,000 in research and development, he was finally successful in inventing the current tree scooter. The scooter consists of a small German motor, a seat, and a set of wheels. Bhatt is able to scale up a 20-meter tree within 5 seconds. He can harvest betel nuts from more than 300 palm trees compared to the 100 trees per day through the traditional manual climbing method. Bhatt has now sold more than 300 scooters at 62,000 rupees, or roughly $819 each. He said that he feels proud for being able to help people with his invention. His life is now complete. Currently, Bhatt and his engineering partner are working on an advanced scooter to scale coconut trees which have a thicker girth and curved trunks. He hopes to unveil this new invention soon as well.
Thank you for watching the Daily Roundup here on EAC News Channel. For more breaking news and updates, check our website eacnews.asia or search EAC News on your Telegram or your favourite app store. More from the EAC News team tomorrow night at 8 p.m. We'll see you then.